Hello and welcome back to my channel. It's been a while since I've shared in detail the very diverse projects that I always involve myself in, but in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about resin and resin tips, universal energy, and other metaphysical confabulations. For the first time I'm attempting to make some unusual orgone objects. I'm using a variety of molds and I've discovered a superior resin. It's a deep pore epoxy resin called liquid glass, which works so much better for me than the marine top coat epoxy and the very popular Let's Resin brand, which have produced unsatisfactory results in my previous attempt. I think that for thin layers of 1/4 inch, like for a canvas top coat, they work pretty well, but not for this purpose. I'm about to just have so much fun by adding some healing crystals to my fancy orgone objects. But what are orgone pyramids and just what is orgone energy, you might wonder? I'm just about to tell you that. Orgone energy was first researched and coined in the earlier half of the 20th century by Dr. Wilhelm Reich, one of Sigmund Freud's early disciples, a psychotherapist turned biophysicist, while seeking a biophysical manifestation of the Freudian libido. A more familiar name for orgone energy is life energy, life force, prana, or chi. Just like a fresh flowing river, this energy needs to be in a state of constant flow, perpetually moving and cleansing itself. If it becomes stagnant and heavy, it is called deadly orgone energy. And Reich believed that traumas, mind blockages, and even electromagnetic frequencies from technology are stored in the body, causing physical and emotional turbulence and degeneration. In the process of trying to color my resin, I learned that specific alcohol inks, like the purple here, turn into a muddy shade of gray when mixed into resin. So next time I want purple resin, I'll get specific resin pigment instead of alcohol ink. I tried 2 kinds of ink and they both changed their color in the resin, and then I just gave up. I decided to use some mica powders to color it up, and that worked. These D&D dies are just for fun and practice actually. My daughter got the molds and I thought, what the heck, let's just play. In 1940, Wilhelm Reich developed the orgone accumulator, which was a metal-lined device that looked like a walk-in closet. Believing that the box trapped this healing orgone energy that he could harness in groundbreaking approaches towards psychiatry, medicine, biology, and even weather research. In the end, things didn't go very well for Reich, and you can really go down the rabbit hole learning about this guy's exciting life. But the orgonite and generators as we know and use them today were invented by another Austrian, Karl Hans Wells, by improving on Reich's orgone accumulator with a similar device made of metal particles melded with resin. Modern orgonite is made of resin, metals, quartz, and/or other healing crystals that are believed to balance and harmonize our bioenergy. Orgonite's fundamental principle is this: the organic materials, aka resin, attract and hold orgone energy, and inorganic materials, such as the metal shavings, are said to simultaneously attract and repel the energy. Traditionally, a quartz crystal is also added to the orgonite mix, which gives off a charge when it is put under pressure. Due to this constant attracting and repelling energy, a scrubbing action takes place, and along with the charge that the crystal gives off, this cleans stagnant and negative energy and brings it back to a healthy, vibrant state. I'm stepping out of the traditional orgone box here, making it look more interesting while still keeping some of the basics of the whole orgone rules. Think of an orgone pyramid as a filter for toxic energy in the atmosphere, like positive ions from EMFs. In this small pyramid, I'm using a lapis lazuli sphere, some crystal quartz, and aquamarine chips. I'm keeping it light and fairly monochromatic. Instead of metal shavings, I'm laying down a handmade Triskelion made of copper to allow for the energy flow. For the cube, I wanted to do something different, adding this little 3D printed alien to create a rather otherworldly crystal planet scene. It's been sitting around in my studio for months, just waiting to be noticed and used. I freshened him up with another layer of color shift paint before adding him to the cube. I had some leftover metallic resin from the D&D dice, so I just added some of that to the bottom. Instead of metal shavings, I put a small metal ball chain that I had lying in my studio because sometimes you just gotta use what you have on hand. Some of the bigger shapes, like this massive pyramid, took several layers to pour. I let each layer dry for a few days before adding another layer. It took several weeks to finish. In the corners, I placed these crystal quartz points to create a sort of a frame, and because I thought it would look cool. Their slight physical imperfections make them ideal for an orgone pyramid. I knew that hoarding crystals over the years will pay off one day. I once heard this guy explaining that the ideal length for orgone coils is an Egyptian royal cubit, which is roughly 21.6 inches, or fractions or multipliers of that number. So that's what I'm measuring now, making my own copper wire Triskelion, which is a symbol that consists of 3 interlocked spirals. It is one of the oldest Irish Celtic symbols in existence, and it is best known to represent the 3 worlds: the celestial, physical, and spiritual. So me, being a bit of a modern mystic of sorts and also an artist, I just couldn't resist the temptation to try and make my own orgonite, because it's always better when you make it yourself. I wanted the big orgone to be epic and have depth and layers, so every layer of resin that I poured had different items in it, crystals and metals of different sorts. I was ready to order some ground metals from the internet, but then my husband brought me some metal shavings from his work, and I thought that they were just as good as the ones that you pay money for. I mentioned that this liquid glass resin is superior to others, and that is because it is a deep pour casting resin, which means that you can pour thick layers at a time and it doesn't create as many air bubbles. I still let the resin sit in warm water for 5 minutes after mixing the 2 parts. This allowed for the air bubbles to rise to the surface easier, and then I torched the surface very lightly, although many sources recommend against doing this. Another important thing to remember when using resin is to work in a well-ventilated area and wear a mask. Although this resin doesn't have any odor at all, it still might contain VOCs, that is, volatile organic compounds, which can be harmful, especially to sensitive bodies. I painted a flower of life design on an acrylic pour, and then I cut it out to fit the bottom of my pyramid. Every time you pour fresh resin, make sure to cover it with a sheet of paper or plastic as it dries to avoid any hair or dust to set on the curing surface. This might ruin the effect. Sadly, the mica powder colored resin spread out quite a bit, and it covered most of the design. It can still be seen, but not as much as I wanted. Then for the last and final bottom layer, I wanted this to be quite opaque and contain the most concentration of metal. I layered all the colored resin in a cup as you would do an acrylic pour, and then poured it straight on. I knew the pattern will not hold completely, but it's always a surprise to unveil the final result and see your creation that you worked so long and hard on. Resin work is a leap of faith and trust. You never know how it will turn out. It's a bit of a surprise, perhaps that's what makes it interesting. When I demolded the pyramid, I was quite amazed at the result. I loved 90% of it. Not bad for a first big pour. A lesson for next time: use less pigments when you want more transparency, maybe get some proper resin pigments. Another unexpected thing was the surface waviness. Some of the walls aren't perfectly straight, and I don't know what caused this. If you do, please let me know. All in all, it was a great adventure, and I'll probably create some more orgone pyramids in the future. They make great gifts too. Just Just remember, place the orgone pyramids around your home to remove the invisible demons of EMF energy given off by cell phones, computers, televisions, and other electronic devices, and evil entities such as nasty neighbors and human zombies. And don't forget, this is still experimental technology for pioneers, revolutionaries, and believers. It's all in the mind.